Welcome to the Holistic Living Podcast, my beautiful friends. You can expect my uncensored, real, and honest thoughts on a wide variety of health topics. If you love to learn on ways to improve your health, your life, your mindset, your emotions, and everything in between in a natural way, you are in the right place, and I am so excited to have you here. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Holistic Living Podcast. This is episode 5, where we are talking about the benefits of intermittent fasting, but also giving some information on how men and women should both be doing fasting differently. And I'm also going to dive into fasting mimetics, which is such a cool topic. Essentially, it is for people who are not able to do long-term fasting, but can still potentially get similar results. So we have a lot to dive into. I want to start by just going into the benefits of intermittent fasting first. This is something that a lot of people are probably familiar with. I am a huge fan, I will say, of intermittent fasting when it's done correctly. And it has yielded me and my clients incredible results for our health, and is something that I personally do long term, again, but in a correct way. So you've probably heard about intermittent fasting. There's also 48-hour fasts, water fasts. There's so many types of fasting diets out there, and they're becoming more and more popular because of the incredible health benefits that you can get from fasting. The reason that you're hearing so much about benefits of fasting and intermittent fasting lately is because more and more studies are coming out showing how incredibly beneficial fasting can actually be for our body. One of the many benefits that fasting has is that it actually triggers something called autophagy. Autophagy is the natural regulated mechanism of the cell that removes unnecessary or dysfunctional components, so essentially toxins. It allows the orderly degradation and recycling of cellular components to take place. All cells in the body, including neurons, repair themselves through autophagy, which is triggered by fasting. And studies have found that autophagy can actually promote longevity by clearing cellular damage and debris out of the cell and body. Caloric restriction is of great value to extend lifespan, reduce inflammation, improve heart function, burn unwanted fat, reduce your risk of cancer, and so much more. Getting good quality deep sleep is important, obviously, to promote longevity too. And of course, eating a healthy diet and exercising and all the other things. But caloric restriction or fasting is extremely beneficial. There are some studies, one in particular I would love for you to check out. It's from Medeo et al. And the title is Can Autophagy Promote Longevity? It's from the Nature Cellular Biology journal back from 2010. It's an incredible article to read to really get an idea of the benefits of autophagy. Excuse me. Okay, so let's get into some of the more important details of fasting. First of all, can intermittent fasting be done long term, or really any sort of fasting? And the answer is yes. Fasting is something that our ancestors used to do. If you are religious at all, if you read the Bible, fasting is a huge, it's often talked about in the Bible. It was a huge part of their life. And it's something that I think, because we have, in our modern world, we have access to so much food, especially in North America. I know more so than many other countries. Food is at our fingertips. It's everywhere we go. It's in every gas station, convenience store, grocery store. It's not hard to access food. So we are no longer fasting because food is just so available. But back in the day, our ancestors and a couple thousand years ago, when people were having to hunt for their food or having to forage for their food, there was periods of long fasting because they physically were not having food just everywhere they turned. And so it was, those times were a lot healthier for sure. People's bodies were so much healthier because of the access to, or the ability to fast because of the lack of access to food. I do think that we overeat, at least here in North America, and we never really give our bodies a chance to go through that important autophagy that needs to take place in order for the cells to clean themselves out, to repair, to replace themselves, and to function optimally. Sorry, I have lost my voice. I've just been doing so much recording and podcasts. Bear with me here. Moving into, how we should be fasting. Should men and women be fasting the same way? So this is where it starts to differentiate. And this is where I find a lot of people a lot of practitioners or personal trainers or whoever's promoting fasting is not, making a specific recommendation for men and women. They're not specifying and stressing the importance of how men and women should be fasting differently. There is a very crucial difference between men and women, and that comes down to our hormones. Men do have a hormonal system, of course, and they also have a cycle as well, but it's very different in how their body cycles through hormones compared to women. Men obviously do not need to grow life. They can't get pregnant. They don't have the regular menstruation that women have. So for men, it's not as important for them to have a quote unquote stabilized hormonal system like it is for women. It's nowhere near as important. So men can really fast anytime for as long as they want. And typically it's not going to stop their fertility or make them lose their cycle or cause some kind of crazy reaction like it would for women. So if men want to do the typical fasting that most people are familiar with, which is wake up in the morning, don't eat until like 12 or 1, then have your first meal and eat until about 7, maybe even 8 p.m. sometimes, and then fast through the night and all through the morning. That's the most common intermittent fasting. You also can do, 48-hour water fasts or broth fasts. There's so many different fasts out there. And for men, again, really, as long as there's no underlying health conditions where they should not be fasting, they can go ahead and do whichever type of fast they want. And it's not really going to negatively impact their hormones. In fact, it's going to give them a lot of good benefits for their health. Women are so sensitive. We are super sensitive creatures, okay? We cannot just fast whenever we want because as ridiculous as this sounds, this is scientifically proven and known that our bodies, even if we are not truly starving, but if we are fasting and doing things in the wrong way, our bodies go into panic mode. They say we are starving. There is no way that we can sustain a life right now, so we are not going to ovulate. We're not going to release an egg because pregnancy is not optimal for right now. Our body cannot handle that. So women can very easily start to have delayed ovulation, which will create like longer cycles or hormonal imbalance. They might start to have even, thyroid imbalance and other hormonal imbalances. And here's why. The way that our bodies work is typically for women in the morning when we wake up, we get a surge. I mean, both men and women have this, but more important for women because we are fertile. And we're ovulating on a monthly cycle. So day to day, our hormones are fluctuating, which men have more stabilized hormones. So coming back to that, in the morning when we wake up, we get a surge of cortisol, which is helping us wake up in the morning. It's giving us energy to start our day. It's great. We need it. We also have a lot of insulin in our bloodstream in the morning. And between the insulin and the cortisol, our body is waiting for food. We wake up and our body creates a lot of the cortisol and the insulin in a way to have food in the body to then break down and metabolize and get that energy out. When women are intermittent fasting, if we are not eating within an hour of waking up, then all of these hormones and insulin that are just sitting in the body waiting for food, waiting for that metabolism to start, they don't get used up. And we start to have too much insulin or too much in the cortisol, things like that in our bloodstream at one time, which actually creates and starts that creation of a hormonal imbalance. Now, another thing is, again, if women are not eating within an hour of waking up, and this is going on for a long period of time. So you wake up and going for hours without eating and doing this weeks and weeks on end, the body will start to say, we are starving, our hormones are getting out of balance. You might start noticing those symptoms of delayed ovulation or some kind of hormonal disruption. So this is how women should be fasting. And it looks a little bit different than men. First of all, we should be eating within an hour of waking up. And anyone with a blood sugar imbalance, by the way, should also be doing this. Anyone with diabetes should be doing this. So intermittent fasting is not for everyone. And we'll get into a little bit more detail on that. But just to, continue with where I was starting, women need to be eating within an hour of waking up. So say you wake up at 8 a.m., you're not going to fast until 1 p.m. You're going to try and do your best to eat by 9 a.m. If you are the type of person that cannot stand food in the morning, that's something that you'll just kind of want to change and slowly eat a little bit every day to get your body used to food. And then eventually you'll start loving and needing those breakfasts. But you can start off by doing a handful of berries and a couple almonds if that's all you can stomach in the morning. But the point is, put food in your body within an hour of waking up, because you have this insulin there waiting. You have the cortisol surge in the morning. This is the time we should be fueling our body. The same thing happens to men, but again, because men are not on a daily and weekly and monthly hormonal fluctuation or cycle, there's not too much to be disturbed in men. But either way, for both men and women, we have the most energy and insulin and everything in the morning. Our bodies are intended to be eating in the morning. When we shouldn't be eating is actually in the later evening and night. So we kind of want to make that intermittent fasting, the common intermittent fasting that people do, and completely switch the clock. Eat within an hour of waking up, but instead of eating until 7, 8 p.m., stop eating by like 5 p.m. So you're just moving that eating window earlier in the day versus having it start later in the day and continuing to the evening or night. So just again, as a recap, instead of eating around 1 p.m. to 7 p.m., you're just going to be eating around 8 or 9 a.m. to about 4, 5, 5:30, maybe 6 p.m. the latest. So you're still going to eat the same meals, same calories, all of that, just moving it earlier in the day when your body is actually meant to and designed to break down and metabolize your food. As we start to move towards the evening, our body is preparing for bed. So typically, especially in the winter when it's darker and the sun starts to go down earlier, our melatonin levels start to increase and our cortisol and insulin start to drop. So this is the time we actually want to be weaning off of our food and starting to not eat and fast, essentially, where we would fast through the evening all the way through the night and then break our fast that next morning. And so you would still be getting a solid 12 to 16 hour fast if you eat this way. You're just changing the timing. So that's how women should be doing it. If women eat this way, you absolutely could reap the benefits of intermittent fasting, and you can do it long-term without side effects. If, however, women are eating the typical way when they're doing intermittent fasting, which is not until 1 p.m., their body has all this insulin waiting around, you might start forming insulin resistance and all kinds of things. So you want to be very careful with protecting your hormones as a female, but still wanting to do the fasting, because fasting is important if it's something you're able to do. So moving into, the topic of, aside from how women should fast, is fasting something that should be done every single day? The answer is yes and no. Everyone is very different. Everyone is unique, and it really depends on your goals, on your toxicity level, on your blood sugar levels, and your hormonal levels or stabilization, and so much more. It also depends on your genetics. There are certain genetic SNPs that really could benefit from you fasting, and this can really help. And then others maybe can't tolerate fasting. So genetics do play a role here as well. What I personally do is I will typically fast Monday to Friday. These are the days I'm working out. These are the days where I am most active. And also the days where I find it's easiest for me to avoid eating in the evening and night because I don't have much going on. I go to bed early so I can go to the gym the next morning, so I can start my day and my work the next morning. So I don't need to be up late. I don't need to be snacking. But typically I want to be enjoying my life as well. So weekends are when I will go and maybe have a snack at night with the kids, some nachos or, a nice healthy fruit salad or something like that, and not obsess about needing to stop eating by 5 or 6 p.m. So that's my personal fasting journey with what my personal fasting routine looks like. Everyone's going to be different, but there were times where in the beginning, my blood sugar imbalance was so bad, I could not fast. I literally would be super dizzy. So I would do fasting every other day, and I would only fast for like 8 to 10 hours at a time, slowly working my way up to 12 and then 13, then 14, then 16 hours. And then was able to finally do 24-hour fasts. Now, this is where it can also get tricky for women. If you are wanting to do a water fast, it can be very helpful and very beneficial. I would not do it anywhere near ovulation, as it can really delay it. So what I would typically say is, if you are to do a fast, maybe try and do it after you've ovulated. So wait until you've had the hormonal surge, the egg was released, you've ovulated, and then your temperature rises if you track your fertility. then after that, that's a good time to maybe do a 24-hour water fast, because then it's not going to delay your ovulation because you already ovulated. So that's one thing to consider. If you are going to do a fast longer than your typical daily 12 or 14-hour fast, I would recommend you do it after you've ovulated. I hope that makes sense. So I want to talk about fasting mimetics. There's so much to the fasting topic, you guys, and this podcast could easily be like 6 hours long if I really get into all of the details. So I'm not going to do that. I wanted this to just be more of like an eye-opener if you weren't aware of how you should be fasting. And if it's a topic you're really interested in and you have a lot more questions about this, you can always reach out to me through my social media, and reach out, and I can help any way that I can, or talk to, your practitioner or your personal trainer, someone who is familiar with not just how fasting works, but also how it is different and should vary from men to women. So moving on to the topic of fasting mimetics, this is such a fascinating topic. Again, you don't hear it too often, but I'm going to share my practitioner's point of view on it and how I use it with my clients. So caloric restriction is not always possible for many people. So there has been an attempt, mainly by pharmaceutical companies, to create medications that will mimic energy restriction, aka calorie restriction. However, a lot of these medications that have been produced by pharmaceutical companies are quite toxic and they have very little effect. So therefore, they're not really used much today. In clients or individuals who can't tolerate caloric restriction, for example, if you have blood sugar issues, eating disorders, that's a huge one. I know a lot of clients will say, I cannot touch fasting because I have an eating disorder and it's going to trigger me. And I completely get that. So in someone like that, someone who has diabetes, there's a lot of situations where caloric restriction just might not be possible. So in people who can't tolerate caloric restriction, using natural compounds and polyphenols may be a very good choice to try and mimic some of the effects of caloric restriction, and they might even lead to the individual being able to tolerate caloric restriction after some time as they progress. So I've worked personally with, hundreds of clients who were not able to fast for more than, say, 8 hours maximum, so just through the night. They would get very dizzy, weak, their blood sugar would drop, there'd be a lot of issues. So obviously we're working on improving their circulation, their metabolic system, all those things. But in the meantime, we wanted them to still get the benefits of fasting. And so we can use supplements to help mimic the benefits of fasting without actually fasting. So that way they could improve their health without the side effects of low blood sugar, fatigue, dizziness, etc. And so this is what fasting mimetics is it's mimicking the fasting without actually fasting. So how can we do this? So coming up, I'm going to share a list of things you can do and take to help imitate the effects of fasting. And this is, again, great for people with low blood sugar or someone who can't fast for more than a couple hours at a time, those who are worried about losing weight, maybe even pregnant women, people who have eating disorders and can't be, triggered by restricting calories, etc. There are certain polyphenol nutrients, resveratrol being the main one that I'm going to talk about today. They are in the family of phytoestrogens, by the way, and these polyphenol nutrients can mimic the benefits of fasting to help burn fat and create energy. You can use the recommended supplements below that I'll be sharing with you either individually or in combination with each other to get those fasting mimetics or those benefits. That being said, always check with your doctor or practitioner before supplementing. The information here is purely informational and educational. It's not meant to diagnose or prescribe or treat. I'm just here to share some incredible nutritional compounds and supplements that can actually help to mimic and imitate those fasting effects. So like I said, resveratrol is the first one. We'll also talk about quercetin or quercetin. Resveratrol has been considered to be a caloric restriction mimetic in lower organisms, mainly on the basis of its activation of sirtuin proteins and its capacity to extend lifespan. In mammals, caloric restriction and resveratrol treatment give protection against a similar spectrum of diseases. So using resveratrol and quercetin together can mimic some of the effects of caloric restriction. And resveratrol has beneficial effects against cancer and protective effects on the cardiovascular system as well. So when you take quercetin with the resveratrol, it can prevent sulfation of resveratrol, therefore improving its bioavailability and its ability to not just, help with the fasting benefits, but also lowering inflammation. So there was a study from Boer, J et al. It's a 2020 study. It's called The Therapeutic Potential of Resveratrol, the In Vivo Evidence. Definitely take a look at that article. It's amazing. And there's also another article from DeSanti C et al. It's a 2000 article, and it's talking about the sulfation of resveratrol, which is a natural product present in grapes and wine in the human liver and duodenum. And this is another article to look into from the Journal of Xenobiotica that will also touch on this topic of resveratrol and quercetin and the benefits of using them for fasting mimetics. So alpha lipoic acid is the next compound I want to talk about. It helps with insulin sensitivity and glucose regulation. So lipoic acid is a therapeutic agent for multiple sclerosis and other, common autoimmune diseases. You want to use it mainly for Th1 mediated autoimmune diseases specifically. So if your autoimmune disease is Th2 mediated, alpha lipoic acid might not be the best route for you. If you don't have autoimmune disease, by the way, you can just ignore this. Just had to put that disclaimer in that you want to use this mainly for Th1 mediated autoimmune diseases. But it does have that effect of regulating insulin and glucose regulation. So this is what fasting does. When we are fasting, we are regulating our blood sugar, stabilizing the insulin sensitivity or resistance. And so taking alpha lipoic acid when we cannot fast can give us those same results. Another one is berberine. Berberine is an alkaloid extract. It comes from berberis, so from certain plants we'll have this, a golden seal as well, which can help with the gut dysbiosis and cholesterol balancing. Another thing that fasting will do. Fasting helps to balance and eliminate the LDL or bad cholesterol. And it also helps to clean out our gut where you're starving off pathogens when you're not eating, so they're dying off because they don't have a fuel source. So by taking berberine, you can get those similar results and effects, again, if you're not able to fast. Now, daily exercise actually helps with the fasting mimetics because moving your body daily can help mimic some of the benefits of fasting and produce a lot of the same benefits. As it's helping with burning fat, it detoxifies the body, the colon, the liver, the blood. It improves your metabolic function and strengthens the immune system as well. So if you're looking to, again, clean out the cells, lower inflammation, stabilize your blood sugar, clean out the gut, stabilize cholesterol, do all of these things that fasting will trigger and will support, you can take resveratrol and quercetin and alpha lipoic acid potentially and berberine and exercise and move your body to get those similar effects. And this will give you that fasting mimetic, those mimicking of fasting without, again, having to actually restrict your calories or your eating window. So such a cool topic. There's so much more to it. This is just a little introduction to that topic, but I'm hoping that with all of this information, you can first of all understand that men and women should be fasting very differently, but that fasting is such an incredible tool and an incredible thing to be introducing into your lifestyle if you're able to literally improve and, lengthen your lifespan and improve your health and your inflammation and have that healthy cell turnover rate, which is important when you have potentially, cancer, things like that. So there's so many benefits to fasting. You just want to make sure you're doing it the right way so that it's not going to interfere or interrupt your hormones or something else and create more issues in the long run. Before I end this podcast, I want to share a story with you. It was a client that I worked with about 4 years ago, and she had PCOS. So she had these really long cycles. She would go from, she was 17, by the way, and she would go from maybe having at one period would be come in 3 months, and then the next one would be in 4 months, and then maybe in 2.5 months, and then 5 months, and then 4 months. It was all over the map, but she never had a period every month. They were far apart. So she had PCOS. She had obviously insulin resistance and blood sugar imbalance and a couple other issues as well. And when we had met, she was fasting because she heard that fasting can help improve your hormones and clear out the body and, improve your inflammation and all those good things, balance cholesterol, everything that we want, which it can. But she was doing your typical intermittent fasting that you see people promote, which is, she wasn't eating until about 1:30 in the afternoon. She couldn't stand eating in the morning, so this worked out well for her in that sense at least. And she would stop eating by about 7:30 at night. And during that time, she would have her breakfast and her dinner and then just a couple snacks. And we were doing supplements and things, but she was not able to shorten her cycle. She wasn't able to get her cycle from 3 or 4 months down to even 2 or 1.5 months. So I said to her, listen, I know you're intermittent fasting. She was also doing the intermittent fasting to get really good gains in the gym. So she was losing and burning fat when she wasn't eating. And then she was working out a lot because she was trying to do a competition. So she had a lot going on. But I had said to her, listen, I know you're intermittent fasting, to help burn fat and all that. I said, we can still do that, but can we please change the fasting window? Instead of eating at 1:30, I know you don't feel hungry in the morning. I know you don't want food, but let's just try and start your first meal to be at 8:30, your last meal at 6. I said, is that manageable? And she, in the beginning, had a hard time. She was like, I'm going to throw up. I can't eat. But anyway, fast forward, she ended up doing it. And after about 4 weeks, she got her period. And from 4 weeks from the last period, she got her period, which was a 30-day period. And her mind was blown because she's never had that in her life. So she was like, just by changing my fasting, my period came back. She's like kind of confused. So she's like, I'll do it again. I'll do it again for another month. And then that month, her period was I think it was 5.5 weeks, which is still really short compared to what she used to have. Anyway, fast forward a year later, we continued to work on her health with homeopathics and supplements, but at the same time, making sure she is eating within an hour of waking up. And now she's back to having her cycle on the dot every 29 days. Every 29 days, never miss. And she still was able to hit her goals of fat burning and all that other stuff with fasting. She just changed the eating window. And just seeing that, it confirms, yes, we know that by starving yourself in the morning, while it's great for men, for women, we have a lot more sensitive system, and it's not something that is sustainable, especially if you're planning to do it long term. So I hope that was helpful, educational, informational, whichever you want to call it. If you have any questions on this topic, like I said, you can always reach me through my social media, but I hope you enjoyed this podcast and learned something. Please share it with your friends and family. And I hope that you have a beautiful rest of your day or night and enjoy the rest of your week. And I will be talking to you in the next podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.